one right here.
Okay, we crossed over to Alatna. Can you find Alatna? Not Alicante, Alatna Hills, Bettles.
It's right there.
We went to Alatna and then to Bettles. You can draw it. From
Okay.
Bettles, go up John River. Is John River, can you see it there?
Yep.
And down the Anatobic River, if you can find that. Follow the Anatobic River down to the Colville.
Okay. Slow down. Okay. Here's the Anatobic
The barrel.
over the ice.
Well, followed, you know, the
Okay.
coast, yeah.
There you
Yeah.
go.
On me. Maybe you should look at these pictures first to see if you get an idea.
Here is identification, speaking to Herb Anderson. Let's see, it's the 29th of September, 1987. And first thing I'd like you to tell me, Herb, is whatever possessed you to go to the Arctic in the first place? Why were you inspired to do that?
You mean to Alaska?
To Alaska.
Well, I had an uncle up there. He worked on the Alaska Railroad as a agent, ticket agent. And he kept writing to me, wanting me to come up there. So I went, you know, I went up there, and that's the way I happened to go up. Yeah.
What did you do then when you first got there?
I went mining. I hired out as a hard rock miner back in the Kantishna to Mount McKinley. It was called Copper Mountain. That was a Guggenheim, you know, they were opening a mine up there. And we were the first ones to start it. That is, my uncle quit his job and he went back there too. But he was no miner, and I wasn't a miner either, but they hired me anyways and put me together with an experienced miner. So that's the way it happened to get back in there.
But what were you mining?
Antimony, silver, lead, some gold, and they had an outcropping at the top of this mountain. And the Googs wanted to know if it went down. So they had us 1,500 feet below there to run a shaft in. And that was what we were doing.
Was there much ore there?
Oh yeah, it's quite, I guess it went down too because what I hear, but I don't know whether they let them mine there anymore or not. Carolyn would know something about that.
Well,
you know, I only stayed there that summer and part of the winter. And then we left and went out to the railroad again. It was 87 miles, you know, and there was no road them days in there. It was all trail, the whole thing. Now they got according to Carolyn, they got a nice road in there.
Well, how did you get over that 87 miles then?
We hiked it, and in the winter drove mush dogs over it. My uncle had a team of 7 dogs, and I worked with him, learned that. And we had a contract to haul in supplies for the Googs through the park. So that's how I happened to get in the dog mushing business.
The gold mining rush, the gold rush days were long over though by the time you got there.
Yeah, there were no big strikes. And gold wasn't too, you know, you didn't get much for it. We were paid $14 an ounce for the Kantishna gold. And of course, Kayaka gold was a higher grade. That was $18 an ounce. We were paid off in gold dust to wherever you worked. And when you come to town, you could change it over to money, you know, dollars.
It was actually in dust form, in a little bag.
Nuggets and dust and small nuggets and stuff like that. But you could go in any place, like any national tea or national NC company, the National Commercial Company. You go in there and they give you, weigh it out and give you the money for it at the going rate.
You ever wish you would have saved a few of those nuggets?
Yeah, the way gold jumped, you know.
What was the biggest nugget you ever saw when you were up there?
Oh, I don't know, I think it was about a $50 nugget, something like that. It was pretty good size. One man found a nugget in Toklat River, right on top of the ground. It was the size of an egg. They talked about it quite often. I don't know what that would go now, but that's unusual to see on top of a gravel like that. And gold being heavy, that goes down.
Were there still remains of the old frontier gold mining towns when you were there?
Oh yeah,
Which
sure.
ones were you in?
Well, I was in Livengood. That's a road goes in there now. Livengood and Hot Springs. There was small strikes there. And up at Fairbanks, of course, I was up there. But I didn't go out on any of the creeks. You know, there was a strike at Fairbanks there, yeah, on many of those creeks.
What did your people back here in Duluth think of your being up there? Did they think it was a dangerous place for you? Or?
Well, my mother did, of course, but no, I didn't hear nothing from the rest of them there. It wasn't any more dangerous than down here when it really comes down to it.
Did you ever run into weather so severe you wondered whether
Yeah,
you'd survive?
we even had on our trip, we had a couple of big storms that just covered us up on the Arctic slope going into.
Where were you at the time of the famous run to carry serum up to Nome?
I was at Nenana, and the first man to carry that serum was Wild Bill Shannon. I knew him well. He was killed later by a grizzly bear in McKinley Park. But his wife worked at a little cupboard restaurant in Nenana, and I was there the night that he left. He came in and said goodbye to her and the rest of us, and he took off. He was the first one to run that serum. You know, it come up by railroad up to Nenana.
And then who picked it up?
Bill picked it up, and then there was 3 other men, and then Eddie Callan picked it up 4th. I think he was the 4th musher to pick it up. And Seppala took it the longest. He took it from, I think it was Kaltag or Holy Cross, wherever it was. I don't remember. That was a long time ago.
Was there a lot of interest in this whole event?
Oh, yeah, it sure was. You know, there's quite a few cases of diphtheria at Nome, and they had to get serum. And
did you see the serum itself or the container?
no, I didn't. I just seen it was all wrapped up in heavy blankets and furs and stuff to keep it from freezing.
Why didn't you go along with them?
Well, I don't know. They seemed to want mushers that had ready, you know, in big teams. All we had was 7 dogs at that time. Look, we could have taken it, but Shannon took it for some reason. I don't know why.
Did he ever talk about that in later years, the trip?
Who?
Shannon?
I didn't see Shannon no more after that. That was the end of that. He came back to Nenana, I suppose, because his wife was there.
Tell me about your meeting of Sir Hubert Wilkins. How did that happen?
Well, I never really met Sir Hubert. I met Sandy Smith. I was at Nenana working in the warehouse there for the railroad, and all this stuff started coming in for the expedition. And I told my uncle, you know, he was the agent there. I says, what's going on? And he says, well, that's Wilkins, and they're going to take a trip up to to Point Barrow and go into the pole. And I said, well, I wouldn't mind going up there and seeing what that country's like. So Sandy Smith, the leader of the dog mushers there, he talked to my uncle, and he said, my nephew would like to go with you. So he hired me right away. And we weren't driving dogs then, or mushing dogs. We had these snow motors. And we had to get, what they figured on doing was taking these snow motors and hauling that gasoline. Plus, we had a Kohler plant that weighed about 700 pounds, all crated up. They were going to use that for generating power for the radio. And we were supposed to take that to Barrow. Now, it didn't work. This snow machine here, we had 2 of them. They broke down, and there was a casting in front, you know, where you steered it. That thing cracked. and there's no way, what are you going to do? You couldn't weld it or do anything out there in the woods. So we got as far as Minto, and we drove them up on the bank of the Tana River there and made arrangements to somebody to haul the gasoline and stuff back to Nenana. And we start buying dogs. And Sandy bought a couple of teams there at Minto, and then at Hot Springs, he bought some more dogs, whole teams and sleds and all. And we took that Kohler lighting plant, and we hauled that in all the way down to Gibbon. And then Eddie Kellen, he wanted more mushers, you know, and but we should have gotten food or dog food there because they had quite a bit of salmon. Instead of that, he just took enough to get us, and we intended to go up the old mail trail to Alatna on the Kyaukuk River, and we weren't going to go the way we went, but they didn't have any salmon there. So we took what little they had, and instead of going up over the Alatna River and down the Arctic slope, we had to go up to Bettles and then go up John River. And that's where I met my partner, Axel, you know. He was mining there. Well, he joined us too because we needed more help. And Eddie Callan and 3 other mushers turned around there and went back. They didn't go with us no more. And before we left, we spent a couple of days at the summit on the Endicott Mountains there, and we shot 3 sheep. Me and a fellow by the name of Big Charlie. He was a Athabascan Indian. I hunted with him, and between the 2 of us, we knocked down 3. Well, that helped. It helped a little, but you know, it was heavy going, breaking trail all the time, and bad snowstorms and stuff like that. Anyways, we said goodbye to the boys. They turned around and went back, and we kept on going. Then we went through the pass and hit the headwaters of the Anatovic River. I understand now they have a little village there, but at that time there was nothing. There wasn't a sled track anyplace. And we kept on going, of course, and no food. And about halfway down, Sandy called a halt. And he says, we can't keep on like this. The dogs, you know, they nothing to eat. And we started killing some of them and feeding them to the others and for ourselves. Well, then Sandy decided that him and me should make a run for it, you know, to try to see if we couldn't get Eskimos. So we started out, we went down the Colville, or in the Anatovic River, and hit the Colville, and kept on going 2 days, and we run into Eskimo village there. Otherwise, we'd all died.
Well, what did you actually had to eat your dogs?
Oh yes, well, you know, we cut them up, and for the time being till. Well, when we got to this village of Eskimos, they had reindeer there. So they went out and killed 4 reindeer, and we told them that the rest of our party was up the river there, you know. And we stayed there one day, and I went out and helped them dress these reindeer, and we went back. And when we come back, the dogs, a lot of them, they shot off most of them, you know, and that's about it. Otherwise, you know, they helped us get through. Well, then, from there, that village, we kept on going until we come to Beachy Point. And at Beachy Point, that's on the, what's the name of that? This here, Beaufort Sea. There's oil there now. And, you know, I went right over that oil. It was on top of the snow. I told Sandy, I says, this is oil. And he says, that's just decayed vegetation. But it was seepage, you know, from the oil there.
At that time, could you have made a claim on that land?
That belonged to the government, all of that. They knew about it, I imagine, but nobody could claim it. Or at least we weren't interested in that. We were interested in getting something to eat, you know, and getting us to bear if possible.
I bet when you got those reindeer, that meat must have tasted pretty good.
Oh, you bet it did. And then a bunch of those Eskimos went with us up to the rest, you know, and they helped take care and get what we could. But we had to leave that heavy Kohler plant there, and that's what Wilkins wanted. How are you going to haul them? Sandy could have hired more teams there. Eskimos would have taken that. So I don't know why he was fussing with us. But Sandy told Axel, and he says, you and Herb stay here at Beachy Point and feed up those dogs so you can make that jump, to Barrow. And that's what we did. We stayed there for about 2 weeks. And Edwardson, the fellow that run the post at Beachy Point, he says, you better get going because it's starting to break up. In other words, the river's running into the sea there. They go out quite a ways and they sink through the ice, and then you'd have to go around. So we didn't start any too soon. And I think it was 4 days or 5 days later we pulled into Barrow. But instead of following the coastline, you cut across on the ice, on the ocean ice there, until you got to Barrow.
How did Wilkins' expedition end then? Was he successful?
No, he wasn't. He hired, I think he had Carl Ben Allison. You know who he was. He was a Dakota flyer. And he was one of the pioneers up in that country too. In fact, I think he was one of the first to fly the mail from Fairbanks to McGrath. We had a contract to haul it by dog team, but he took it away. And that's the expedition. You've seen the pictures here. He smashed the planes up, and but I think if I remember correctly, Ben Allison and Wilkins actually did fly out, but they had trouble with the plane they had, and they had to ditch it and walk back. Maybe in your book that you got, you'll say something about it.
Yeah. Well, did you see that crash with the trimotor?
No, that was in Fairbanks, and we were up at Barrow at that time. But we had this trimotor plane. We had a terrible time to get that thing into the air because it had 3 motors. And you know how it is. One motor pulls a little heavier than the other. And we dug runways 2 feet wide for the tail skid and the wheels. And boy, you talk about trouble, and we had to drain the oil, 40 below zero weather. We had to drain the oil every day. We tried to get that thing off the ground and then pull it back and start over again the next day. Put that oil back in and crank those motors up and, to get going. It was a terrible lot of monkey business.
Did you ever get to ride in any of those early aircraft?
No. No, I know Lieutenant Wisely. The trouble of it was, too, they didn't understand too much about trimotor planes, like Major Lamphere. I think he's the one that crashed it at Fairbanks. They just didn't seem to understand how to handle them. And that single motor, I think that crashed up too, upon landing. I don't know who paid for all that.
Well, didn't it bother you a lot when you had to kill those dogs?
It sure did,
Did
yeah.
you have an attachment to them,
sure.
like pets almost?
Yeah. Well, not like pets, but you'd be surprised what the dogs go through. You see, those dogs that we had weren't racing dogs. They were freight dogs, Malamutes. Yeah.
How did you feel about eating them?
I felt wanting something to eat, that's all. Really, I don't know, you'd be surprised how far you can go without eating. I mean, days.
Did you think about food a lot?
Oh, yes. I thought of, beans or anything good to eat.
What did the dog meat taste like?
It's hard to explain. It tastes like any kind. It ain't too bad, but our dogs got awful thin and skinny, But we didn't have too much. We didn't have to eat too much of it because we run into Eskimos there, and we got reindeer meat. Well,
Did you make, then after that trip was over, did you come back to Duluth?
Let's see, no. We were at Barrow, and Charlie Brower, he was a post factor there for the Liebes Company Fur Company. And he asked Axel and myself if we'd go down to Wainwright. They had another post down there that belonged to the same company. And go down and give a follow. The post factor there was Jim Allen. And he wanted to know if we wouldn't go down there and stay with him because it was getting kind of crowded at Barrow with all this people coming in there, you know, for the expedition. So we did. We went down there and we stayed with Jim Allen, I think it was a couple of months. And we helped him fix his store up there, put a roof on the building and painted, and you know, we eat what they had, and that's the way it was. Well, then we left there. We went out walrus hunting with them. Oh, it's kind of hard to remember exactly everything, but we did hunt walrus with them. And
did you get any?
Oh yeah, we got 21 in this letter here. You Axel told. But then the cutter, in fact, there was two. You see, it's all ice at that time of the year, and it starts breaking up. And the boats go through these leads. And if the wind changes, you know, it can crush. A lot of those boats got crushed in the early days, whaling boats. But Axel and I, we went with the cutter back to Nome. And they had dentists on there and doctors, and they took care of the natives. They had to fix their teeth and stuff like that. Well, in the meantime, a three-masted schooner for the Liebes Company came up too. The name of that boat was the Brower, after Charlie Brower. And they had a lot of supplies, you know, for the post there. But when the cutters, when they were ready to go back, they were headed south again, so Axel and I went with them. And I don't know yet whether Rossman and Wasky went with them. I don't know. Oh yeah, I forgot to tell you. I had a rifle that, you know, Eskimos wanted it. So I agreed to sell it. I sold it to an Eskimo there that wanted it really bad, and I said, how much would you give me for it? And he said, I haven't got any money, but I've got fox skins. You know, they have these Arctic fox, and they were worth $40 a piece. Well, I says, give me 2 fox skins and you can have it. So he gave me, my gosh, I only paid $35 for that rifle at Nenana. So that's, I had a little money in my pocket. Otherwise, we didn't have no money, Axel, either one of us.
Well, what were you paid to take that trip?
That's something I didn't know. They told us, you see, I should have had a contract, a written contract. But we just went by word of mouth. Sandy said, oh, we'll take good care of you, and money-wise, and that. Nothing. He didn't even want to pay us at the end of the trip. But my uncle went after him. He says, you pay that kid. He says, or you're going to court. And he came across. He paid me what money we had, just around $400. That wasn't too bad. But we ended up, the cutter let us off at Nome, and we didn't have just that $80 I had for the fox skins. That's all we had. And we had to get across St. Michael's, that, I don't know, that piece of water there in Seward Peninsula. And we caught the last boat going north, river steamer. And when I got on there, the purser asked me, he says, your name Anderson? And I says, yes. He says, your uncle's got a first-class ticket on this boat here. And he said, if you ever see to it that he gets a free ride up here. So Axel and I had a cabin all to ourselves all the way back to Nenana. And that was the last boat. If we'd have missed that, I don't know, we'd have to stay there the rest of the winter.
Well, did you drive dogs as a part of your job at some point in time? Did you?
Yeah, I mushed in McKinley Park, you know, with my uncle.
Who were your customers?
With what?
Did you have? You say you did this commercial?
No, we worked for the Googs, Guggenheim. you know, in that mine. And they had to have stuff in there, food, and it's all run by dogs. There was no road in them days, just a dog trail. And that's how I happened to get mushing dogs.
Did you ever have a run-in with a grizzly?
No, and I didn't really want, but there were plenty of grizzly bears. We've seen them quite often and a lot of caribou. In fact, McKinley Park had more caribou than I've seen on that whole trip to Barrow. And
Did you rely on wild game? Did you shoot wild game to eat on these trips?
Yes, you bet. You see, in them days, a prospector or a miner was allowed to kill what he needed for himself and his dogs. The men, we usually ate sheep, you know, and then we fed caribou to the dogs, and we ate caribou too.
Now, did you go on any other expeditions besides this one, or was that it?
Well, I went on my Uncle Slim and a fellow by the name of Gene Nelson. Nelson knew of some silver and lead claims up in the Kykuk up at Wiseman. And we wanted to go up there and stake them because they had a buyer for it. And in order to do that, in the latter part, in the fall of the year, I spent about 5-6 years up there. I really don't know how many years it was, because I come into that country in 1923, just when the railroad was finished. So, and we come out of there in around 29 or 30, something like that. But we went up and we wanted to stake this ground. And we bought 3 poling boats and lashed them together and put our food and dogs and everything, and we went down the Tanana from Nenana and down the Yukon to the mouth of the Kykuk. Then we had to work our way all the way up the Kykuk River. And we got as far, I think it must have been about 10 miles below Alatna, and we hit ice. It started coming down, you know, freezing up, and we couldn't do no more. We had to turn around and run with it. So we run back down to the Kykuk station at the Yukon there and the Kykuk River. The Kykuk is a clear water river, and the Yukon is a silty river. Anyways, we got back down there, and we sold our outfit to Sam Dubin. He was a factor at that post at Kykuk Station. And we took a river steamer going back to Gibbon. And we got off there with our dogs and everything, and we intended to run, when we got snow, go up on the trail, you know, and stake that land. Well, we all 3 couldn't very well go, so we drew straws, and my Uncle Slim, he was elected to go up there and stake that mine, you know. What it really was, on Wild River, there was a whole shaft of ore, silver and lead, and the river cut it, and that stuff was scattered all. And you know, the people up there around Bettles and everywhere, they're just tickled pink to somebody because it would help develop. Yeah, they've tried to sell that for many years, and nobody, it was too far away and too hard to get it out. Anyways, Slim went up there, and he staked that ground. A fellow from Bettles went along and helped him, and then he came back down, and in the meantime, Gene Nelson and myself, we had one dog, his name was Dawson, he had a bad leg. So we cooked up a bunch of food and started up the trail to Nenana. I don't know how many days it took us, but we came out at Dunbar on the railroad, and a fellow by the name of Carl White, he had a roadhouse there. So he asked Nelson and I if we wouldn't cut some wood for cordwood. So we did, $5 a cord. Well, in the meantime, he was hauling freight from Dunbar to Livengood by horse. He had 2 teams of horses, and he asked me, one of his teamsters was sick, if I wouldn't take a load of mail up to Livengood. So I said I hadn't had much experience with driving horses. My brother was a good teamster. Anyways, I agreed to. I went with a fellow by the name of Jim Duffy. He was a head teamster, and took this big load of mail. And you can imagine sitting on top of that in that cold. You pretty near freeze to death before you, and you couldn't no way of getting off. If you walked on the side of the road, you go up to your neck in snow. It was a deep snow there, and you couldn't walk and back. You just had to sit there. Well, like, long story short, we got live and good and got rid of our loads, and then we took some stuff back. Well, then we left this Carl White, his name was, that owned that, and we went down to Nenana. It isn't too far down the road. And then there, I lost track of Nelson, but Slim, my uncle, he was transferred from there to Fairbanks. They sent him up there to take the agency there. So I had to go to Fairbanks. When I come up there, he put me to work in the warehouse again. That's one thing. You should have an uncle if you're going to Alaska. And we rented a cabin at Fairbanks, $10 a month for a cabin. It had 2 rooms, nice and warm, and we did our own cooking, you know. And I went to work on the transfer crew. You see, that was the end of the railroad, of the standard gauge. And from there, everything that went out to the mines had to be transferred onto narrow gauge. All that cordwood and all that produce and stuff that was going out there. So I went to work with a crew of men that we were doing that, unloading that cordwood. It took 2 narrow gauge cars to equal what you had on one standard gauge flatbed. And all that dynamite, you know, they're using the mines. We had a whole carload of dynamite. We had to transfer that, and they took that up there. That was mines at Esther and Clary and back in Fairbanks district. I don't know. Worked there at Fairbanks quite a long time. Well, from there, they put Slim back to Nenana again. In the meantime, I'd come home. Do you remember, Mom, when, I can't remember, he went down and got married, you know, here in West Duluth. And he wanted me as best man. I think that was, oh, it's so hard to remember. Anyways, I came down, and he married a girl from the Burns and Christensen Hospital at Harbors. And her name was Clara Sorensen. And she didn't want to go to Alaska. Oh no, nothing doing. So I told my uncle, I said, I'm going back north as quick as I can make enough money. I went to work in the steel plant again. But you know, them days, the going wage was 30 cents an hour. 10 hours a day, you got $3. And it took a little time, you know, to get my $300 back again to get my fare up north. Anyways, I went to work, and Slim, my uncle, he threw up 7 years' rights on the Duluth and Iron Range Railroad in order to go to Alaska the first time. And then he quit his job on the Alaska Railroad to come down here and get married. He shouldn't have done that. He should have taken a leave of absence. Anyways, he finally talked Clara into going to Alaska, and she decided to go. And we all went again. That was my second trip north. Well, when I think I had $18 left, and Slim asked me, he said, how much money have you got? And I said, I have $18. He said, well, give it to me. So I gave it to him, and when we got to Seward, he got off the boat, he went in the railroad depot there and called Cunningham up at Anchorage. And Cunningham told him, he says, you go up and take the Nenana station that you used to have again. So he came out and he threw his hat in the air. He said, I got a job. And we all went back up to Nenana. And I helped them get their home started. You know, they had a company house they lived in. And that's the way it went. But, you know, this old Morris Marino at McKinley Park Station, the first time I came north, I ended up there at McKinley Park Station. And I didn't have very much money left either. And I asked Morris, he owned that place there, what do you call it? A what?
The road.
A roadhouse, yeah. And I says, I don't know if I'm going to be able to pay you. I don't have too much money. He said, what do you care, kid? You're going in there to work, aren't you? And I says, yeah. He says, well, when you come out, pay me. Stay here as long as you want. You know, that's the type of people they were. Well, that's the way I did. I stayed there for about a week, and then I met another old fellow that I became partners with, Ed Jern. He'd pulled in out of Copper Mountain with 13 dogs on bare ground. And he told me, he says, are you going into the Kantishna? And I says, yeah. He says, well, if you got anything you want in, I'll put it in the sled and I'll take it in for you. So I gave him some things I had, a suitcase, and I took a pack and a rifle. And a fellow by the name of Dick Lynch, he wanted to go in and see that country too. So we went in together. And the first 17 miles, I think it is, to Savage River, I really don't know the mileage. It was no road them days. And Dick and I, we made Savage River, and it was bright, you know, in the summertime. There was hardly no night. Then we made a mistake. We wanted to go, instead of going straight ahead from Savage River, we took a left and went up. And we finally hit the Sanctuary River up at a place, fellow by the name of Tom Armstrong had a cabin there. And we realized our mistake the next day. So we crossed the Sanctuary and went back until we hit the trail again. And we went to Igloo Creek, and from there over to Teclanica, Steel Fork, and from there to Toklat River and Polychrome Pass, and down to Copper Mountain. But you know, for a tenderfoot or cheechawker like me, and Dick he'd been there a couple of years more than I had at that time, and he was more of a sourdough than I was. Well, we got in there and we went to work for the Googs, you know, right away. They needed miners. I went to work with a fellow by the name of John Anderson. He owned a roadhouse at Wander Lake, in the upper end of Wander Lake. And he often told me, he says, if you ever come to Wander Lake, be sure, you know, to come over there and I'll give you some fishing tackle and you can catch some trout. Yeah, it was a good trout lake when you, and I stayed there at Copper Mountain. We stayed there that summer and most of that fall, and then we pulled out and went back on the trail back to McKinley Park Station.
So all the jobs you had then, you were a miner, a dog musher, railroad worker?
Yeah, railroad worker. I worked on the sections, and I did just about everything. Placer mining and cabin building, and you know, you naturally would. But I had some good old timers that I traveled with that knew what to do. They taught me how a lot of that handling game and building cabins, but then this has nothing to do with this trip to Barrow now that I'm talking about. This old fellow, Ed Jern, his name was. He was a big husky Dane, and he says, I've got 4 claims on a creek called Little Moose Creek back in the Kantishna. And he says, you come with me, and if we can't make a go of it there, I know a fellow by the name of Charlie Christensen has some claims up north of there, and we can go to work for him at $14 a day, board and room. So it sounded pretty good to me. So I went back with Ed, he put his dogs in a fish camp on the Tanana River, and we packed into Little Moose Creek. Well, we got there, and the cabin, some of those cabins, I don't know what the reason was, but they don't build them high enough. So he says, the first thing we're going to do is take the roof off that cabin, and we're going to go 4 logs higher. And we did that. And he was a crackerjack, that fellow. He came in over the Chilkoot Pass in the early days, and he'd been there He was an ex-wrestler. And did you ever know a man here named Chris Pearson? Well, him and Chris Pearson in the early days in '98, they'd gone over the Chilkoot Pass and they were partners. Chris Pearson was a wrestler here in Duluth, and he had charge of the Grassy Point outfit out there. He took care of that. Anyways, we took these logs off that cabin and we run it up four logs higher. And then we put poles there in the moss. He said, that moss in that country, oh, it's thick. And I packed it down and we threw about a foot of dirt on top of it. And then he had to build a saw pit because he'd hauled logs the winter before with his dogs, and he had some nice logs. And we had to build a dam. We had that land or that ground in that creek, a Little Moose, was 13 feet to bedrock. And you can't start in and shovel all that. So we built a dam, and it was called an automatic dam because when the gate would go down and the water would start building up, and when it got full, it would run through a sluice box, you know, until it hit. And then we had a big box there with chains, and when I got about a ton of water in there, it would go down, and the gate would go up. Understand? Then we had a plug in the bottom of this box that let just so much water out. So when the dam was empty, the box got empty too, and the gate overbalanced, and she slammed shut. That's why it was an automatic dam. Anyways, we kept there, and we ground sluiced that ground there for that whole summer. And we cut our logs by hand, whipsawed them, and to get boards, you know. And we made sluice boxes and had it all set up on a 4% grade to start shoveling in. You see, we ground sluiced that land down on that claim down to within about 8 inches of bedrock. That's where the concentrates is in there. Then that night, we were going to shovel in the next morning. We had one heck of a storm. It rained, and Ed woke me up about 2 o'clock in the morning, and lightning was flashing there, and he says, "Get up, we got a flash flood here. We got to get those boxes out of there." So we went down there and threw all the boxes up on the banks as far as we could, and he took a pick, and I took another pick, and we pulled a gate off the dam. And we had another gate on the other end of this dam. We had an 8-foot head of water. You know, that dam was, and we could just see that water rising. And it come up, and that dam just rose up like a big boat, and down the creek it went. And all the debris from up above filled in our cut. Well, you know, it's too late to start in again, so all we could do is we went up above there and went to work with Charlie Christensen for a while, and we got a little money in gold. He paid us in gold dust. He had pretty good claims, but there was gold on those claims that we were working, because one day I asked Ed, I said, "How do you know we're working here for nothing?" He says, "Okay, take that gold pan there and a shovel and come on with me." He went right out in front of the cabin in the creek and filled the gold pan, and we took it over to the side and he washed it out. There was nuggets in there. You could hear it ring when you hit the pan in the gold pan. He said, "Now do you believe me? There was gold, plenty of it in there, but I don't know if anybody ever went back in there or not."
There still may be gold there.
Oh, the gold is there. I don't care. Yeah, the gold is heavy. That keeps falling down. And we had ground sluiced it, you know, 13 feet down to bedrock. And that gold, those are concentrates there. That gold don't go no place. It just filled it in again, you know, it's all that gravel.
Have you thought about going back up there to look?
Oh, yeah, I often thought about it. And one of my boys, he even wanted to go with me and go back in there. But now, I imagine they'll let you off at Toklat River. And the way we did it, we'd go to Toklat River, and then we go down the Toklat for about 5 miles. And then we'd take and climb the banks there, and we cut due west until we hit Clearwater. There was another river that ran into Kantishna River. And then we happened to come there. That's the first time we went in, and it was all flooded way from bank to bank. And the only way you're going to get across is to wade it. Well, we waited there 2 days for that river to go down, and finally it went down far enough so that we could cross, you know. And then got on the other side, and Ed caught a bunch of grayling, a lot of grayling. And he says, we got to go down about a half a mile to the mouth of the river. The little moose run into this clear water. So we did that. We went down there, and we went up to this old claims up there in the cabin, you know. That's the first time we went in there.
You really had gold fever too then, along with the rest.
Yeah, I was sure interested in that. You know, the Kantishna country there, that was a gold strike there, but it petered out. And I knew quite a few people. I knew those that were mining, like Quigley, Joe Quigley, and John Anderson, and Lilladale, and those people. I knew all of them.
Did some of them become rich?
Well, I wouldn't say so, no. I don't think any of them, even John Anderson, all the work, he had a lot of claims staked all around Mount McKinley there. You see, Copper Mountain's right at the base of Mount McKinley, or right in that territory there. John wasn't very rich either.
They were always following a dream, weren't they?
That's right, it seemed that way.
Well, if you had been able to work that spot that was flooded out in the storm.
Yeah, I often wonder what we would have got out of there.
Yes, but you were not a partner in that work. You were working just for wages?
No, we were both partners. You see, when you stake ground, a claim, at that time you had to do $100 worth of assessment work before you could call it your own. But you know, the miners, they usually call, you could say whatever you know, so many dollars a day until you got your claims assessment work on it. And there's a recorder, you had to go and record those claims. The one for the Kantishna at that time was at Diamond, a little backwoods outfit, and where he took care of your claims and seen to it that the work was done on there. But you know, the work that Ed and I did went far more than what those claims came to. Building dams and fixing the cabin and cutting lumber. Yeah.
Do you, when you look back on all of this, do you regret having gone up there?
No, I don't. It was a good experience for a young fellow too, you know, and I met a lot of nice people. I don't regret it. I didn't get rich, but I came home and the folks bought this dairy and they wanted me to go to work there. Otherwise, I probably would have stayed there and kicked the bucket up there.
Did your uncle stay there, or did he move back?
My uncle?
Yes.
He retired. He was an agent at Anchorage, the last job he had for the Alaska Railway. Then he retired, and he came down to Duluth. He drove down the Alcan Highway, and him and his wife, they traveled all over the United States. They bought an Airstream camper, and he died at Hemet, California, and his wife is still there. She's in an invalid home.
What tell him about Ed Sheeran, how he get his hair burnt off?
Oh yeah, Ed Jern, he was quite a fellow. He was an old-timer there. You know what I don't understand is in your resume there of Mount McKinley, or McKinley Park, that they don't mention Ed Jern. He was one of the best old-timers back in there.
You probably don't know.
Well,
Yeah.
tell me about him.
Well, he was an old-timer, and I don't know how, he's dead now, but he was a good cook, good camp cook. He made sourdough bread and sourdough hotcakes, and we had a lot of berries. There was blueberries and lingonberries and stuff like that. But we hauled in all our food into the claim there, a whole year's supply of food. And he did the cooking, and I washed the dishes. But he had a big beard, and his hair come way down over his shoulders, and he used to wear an eye shade. He looked just like one of those old Roman chariot drivers. And he was a good sourdough, that fellow was. He treated me well. But he smoked like a trooper. He wouldn't let me smoke, you know. He says, you don't need to smoke. He says, you can, when you get older, you can, if you feel like it, go ahead. But when I was with him, he wouldn't let me smoke. And we had to take a bath every Saturday night, whether you needed it or not. And we had a coal oil can, you know what they are. And we filled that full of hot water, and we used towels and stuff. Took a bath. And he said, you take a bath and I'll go out and take a rifle and go for a walk. And see, by the time he'd come back, well, I'd take him back. And then that's the way he did it.
I'm looking at you. How old are you there?
I'm about 19 years old there. And that's Rossman to my left. And these are townspeople, the rest of them there, that are out on the ice watching us go. And this fellow here next to Sandy, see this fellow here with the parky on? He was sent from Detroit, Ford Motor Company, to help take care of these snow motors that we went with. But he couldn't do nothing, you know, because there's no way of fixing this thing broke in front where you couldn't steer it. That's a Ford tractor with two big bullet-shaped drums, and these have about 3-inch spirals on them. And when you went ahead, the drums turned inward. And it was a power takeoff and back. It had a sprocket chain, so when you went backwards, the drums turned out. You know, it's just like a big screw. They go in and come out.
How well did they run?
Oh, they run all right, but look at the load. We had all that gasoline. There's no way that they could start to pull that. And I know they sent me ahead with a big steel rod when we got going, and so that in case it went through the ice. You don't know if it'd be a bad spot. So in a way, I was kind of glad they did get rid of them. They would have never worked. There's no way that he could have hauled that gasoline up. This is a single motor. That's a single motor Fokker, and this was taken at Fairbanks. And this man here is Major Lamphere. That's the Army sent up with Major Wisely, or Lieutenant Wisely, those two men. And that's Wilkins there, Sir Hubert. I don't know who that fella in the back there. It looks like our old friend Gene Nelson. It sure looks like him, but I don't know if it is or not. That was taken at Fairbanks. We dug it, runways for it up at Barrow. I know Wisely said, if I ever get this thing in the air, I'm going to point it south and I'm going to get out of here. He was for landing. Major Lamphere was, I understand he was flying it. And they just didn't understand how, you know, to land it.
Where did this crash?
Right at Fairbanks Airport, at Fairbanks. Partner, Axel Edmund, him and I drove the last dogs into Barrow. And this is Edgar Callan. And he's from Caltag. He had a post at Caltag. He come to visit Axel, and that's where they took that picture.
But what did the man on the right, was he one of the drivers of who drove
Yeah, he was with us. He went as far as the top of the Endicott's, and he turned around and went back. But Axel and I, we kept on going with Rossman and Wasky. But that's who they are, and that was taken in his home.
Name?
Earl Rossman.
And he was an archaeopathy photographer.
Yeah.
Did they take movies of this expedition?
Oh yeah, all the way. That's a camera he's got there, and so he's got an IMO camera here, Bob Wasky. Wasky passed away quite young.
Radio man.
Yeah, he was our radio.
What was his name?
Bob Wasky.
How many were there in your group when you took in the radio equipment?
Well, let's see, there was Wasky, Rossman, and me, and Axel, and Sandy Smith. That's 5, ain't it?
And then where did you go?
We went from Nenana down to Tanana. But you mean where we went with the snow motors?
Yeah.
We left them at Minto. That's about 18 miles below Nenana, down in here someplace. And then from there, we went, start buying dogs and teams, you know, and we went down here, down to Tanana.
Did you follow right along the river?
Well, that's, the Yukon comes in there at Tanana, see? The Tanana is the south branch of the Yukon, and they run together there. That's why they call that Tanana crossing. I call it Gibbon. Anyways,